So this is the B4C4P4 higher past paper 2 run through. Remember that you have these equations at the front of your paper if needed, usually for the physics section. The first section is the Bolger section, so it says look at the photograph. It shows 2 palm trees. During photosynthesis, the trees make glucose. The trees change the glucose into other substances such as starch for storage. Describe one other substance into which trees change glucose and what the new substance is used for. So 2 marks here. You've got to give a use and what the substance is used for. So you could either use cellulose, which is a mark, for cell walls, which gives you a mark. Or you could say fats for storage or waterproofing or buoyancy. Or you could say protein for growth or repair. And then it says, give 2 reasons why soluble glucose is turned into insoluble starch for storage. And that's 2 marks again. So first mark is saying it doesn't move away to other cells. And the second mark is saying because then it isn't affected by water concentration. Look at the graph. It shows the effect of increasing light intensity on the rate of photosynthesis. The concentration of carbon dioxide is kept at 0.04% throughout the experiment. Explain the shape of the graph. So 2 marks again. So at A, photosynthesis increases with increasing light because light is a limiting factor. And then at B, light is no longer the limiting factor. So there's no effect. Or you could say that carbon dioxide or temperature is limiting the rate, as increasing light has no effect. So A, light is the limiting factor, but at B, light is no longer the limiting factor. Julie says that if the carbon dioxide concentration increased, the graph will be steeper at A and level off at the same value at B. Niall says that if the carbon dioxide concentration increased, the graph will be the same at A but will level off at a higher value at B. Who is correct? And explain your answer. So Niall is correct, but that doesn't get you a mark. The marks are for saying that at A, carbon dioxide is not the limiting factor, so an increase will not cause any change. And then at B, carbon dioxide is limiting factor, so an increase in carbon dioxide will cause the rate to continue to increase. So that's exactly what Niall says. Joe is investigating the effect of some... this is the 6 mark question, which you need to mark yourself using the mark scheme. You can be found on the Blue Coat Science Google site, and then ask your teacher if you want it checked. In Joe's experiment, water moves from the tubes to the leaves through transport vessels. Write the name of these vessels. So that is the Xylem, spelt with an X, not a Z. Australia produces a lot of sugarcane. Insects eating the sugarcane affect the production of the crop. Farmers use pesticides to kill the insects. The pesticides cause the death of some animals higher in the food chain. Explain why this happens. So 2 marks here. 1 mark saying the pesticides, animals or insects contain the pesticide or eaten by animals higher in the food chain. Or you could just say that pesticide passes up the food chain, and then the pesticides accumulate or build up in these animals, causing death, which is known as bioaccumulation. So you could say that if you wanted to. Cane toads were introduced to feed on the insects. Cane toads are much bigger than the native Australian toads. Cane toads are also poisonous. The introduction of cane toads was not a success. Explain 2 reasons why. So 2 marks. First mark, where there's 2 out of these 3, could say that cane toads had no natural predators, or the cane toads did not eat all the pests, or we could say that cane toads reproduced rapidly and outcompeted the native toads. Look at the diagram. It shows part of a sewage works. Sewage is broken down or decayed by microbes such as bacteria. Sewage is broken down more quickly in the summer than in the winter. Give 2 reasons why. So the first mark is saying that microbes or bacteria reproduce more quickly at higher temperatures, and microbes and bacteria respire more quickly at high temperatures. So those 2 are needed for both those marks. After sewage has been treated, it can be used as a fertiliser. Fertilisers provide minerals containing elements that are needed for healthy plant growth. 2 of these elements are nitrogen and magnesium. Explain why plants need each element. So the nitrogen is to make proteins, or you could say to make amino acids or enzymes or DNA, and the magnesium is to make chlorophyll. You didn't need the word make here in order to get the mark. If you just put those, that'll get you both marks. Explain how minerals are taken into the root hairs of the plant. So 2 marks, one for saying by active transport or active uptake, or uptake using energy, and the second mark is saying against the concentration gradient, or up the concentration gradient, or from lower concentration to higher concentration. You have to use the word concentration there to get that mark. Now on to the chemistry section. So first question says, this question is about the elements in the periodic table. Look at the list of elements, there's some elements. Answer the questions, choose your answers from the list, and you can use them once, more than once, or not at all, and your periodic table might help you here. So it says, write down the name of the non-metal element, which is a grey solid at room temperature. So that is iodine, not a metal, but it's still a grey solid. Which element has an atom with only 5 electrons in its outer shell? So here, looking for one of these that is in group 5, and the one in group 5 is nitrogen. If you look it up in your periodic table. And then last one, write down the name of the element which has electronic structure 2882. So you could just add these electrons, and it adds up to 20, then look up 20 in the periodic table, and that is calcium. So calcium is the correct answer there. Many scientists helped to develop the theory of atomic structure in the early 1900s. A scientist called Thomson discovered the electron, another scientist called Rutherford had the idea of atoms having a nucleus, and a third scientist called Bohr had the idea of electron shells. Look at the diagram, it shows the structure of an atom with a nucleus, electrons, electron shells. Explain why the nucleus of an atom has a positive charge. And this is because the nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. The protons are positive and the neutrons are neutral. So that's the important thing. You need to say the nucleus has protons that are positive and neutrons that are neutral. The scientists Thomson, Rutherford and Bohr told other scientists about their ideas about atoms. Suggest how and explain why they told other scientists. So first mark saying how they told other scientists, so use of conferences or books or journals, or they publish their results. And you can't say telephone, internet, television or video because they wouldn't have been around when these were discovered. And then the second mark is for saying why. So this is because it allowed peer review by the scientists, or checking of their work, or repeating of their experiments to develop their work. So it's finished diagram showing an isotope of the element above. So if you count number of protons in the last element, it had 5. So an isotope, remember, has the same number of protons, but a different number of neutrons. The last one had 6 neutrons. So you just got to put any number of neutrons other than 6. So you just put 1 if you like, and that would be an isotope. This question is about group 1 elements such as sodium and rubidium. And the question is, group 1 elements such as sodium react with water. Sodium hydroxide and their symbol and hydrogen are made. Write down the balanced symbol equation. So first thing to do when you're doing symbol equations is first an arrow, then write down the things that are reacting. So it says sodium, which is Na, tells you that here, reacts with water. Hopefully you know the symbol for water, it's H2O, and it makes sodium hydroxide, which it gives you, and hydrogen gas, which is H2. So that gets you the first mark. Second mark is for balancing, and you just need to have 2 of those, 2 of those, and 2 of those. The reaction of rubidium with water is more violent than the reaction of sodium with water. Rubidium is more reactive than sodium. Explain why. Use ideas about electrons. Remember that when sodium reacts, it loses its outer electron, as does rubidium's. Now rubidium's outer electron, remember the outer electrons are held by the nucleus, which is in the centre. If the electron is more weakly held, then it is going to be lost more easily and you're going to have a more violent reaction. Now rubidium's outer electron is further away from the nucleus than sodium's, which means that it's going to react more quickly. So what you have to put here for the 2 marks are the idea that it's easier for rubidium to lose electrons because rubidium's outer electron is further away from the nucleus. So it's easier for rubidium to lose its electron because it's further away from the nucleus, or rubidium has more shells. So next question is a 6-mark question, so please mark this yourself using the mark scheme on the Blue Coat Science Google site and then ask your teacher to check it if you're unsure. The next question is about the reaction of halogens with alkali metals. Astatine reacts with potassium. Construct the word equation for this reaction. So you've got astatine reacting with potassium. Remember, if it reacted with chlorine or iodine, then it would be potassium iodide or potassium chloride. So this creates potassium astatide. Got to change that last bit of the wet name. Chlorine reacts with sodium to make sodium chloride. The electronic structure for chlorine is 287. Use the dot and cross model to describe the bonding in sodium chloride and a molecule of chlorine. You only need to include the outer shell electrons. So sodium chloride is an ionic compound, so this is where electrons are transferred. So sodium and chlorine, although it did say you only have to draw the outer shells, so I'll just do the outer shell for chlorine. So sodium is going to lose its electron to the chlorine, so what you'll get is this, and you have a positive charge on the sodium and a negative charge, don't have to circle them, a negative charge on the chlorine, and the first mark is for having the correct charges, so a 1 plus charge here and a 1 minus charge there, and then the correct electron structures. And then chlorine, Cl2, is where it's a covalent molecule, so they share electrons. So you're going to have a pair of electrons in the shared bit, and then fill in the rest, like so. So 1 mark for your shared pair, and 1 mark for the rest. River water needs to be purified before it can be used as drinking water. Look at the table, it shows the mass of different ions in 1,000 grams of river water. Kritika, a research chemist in Water Purification Factory, needs to know the percentage of lead ions in the water sample. What is the percentage by mass of lead ions in the river water? So you've got 0.00522 grams of lead ions, and then that's in 1,000 grams in water, so divide that by 1,000, then times it by 100, and that gives you a percentage of 0.000522, which gets you that mark. And then the river water is treated in the Water Purification Factory. Suggests why the tap water the factory makes may still contain lead ions. So that's the idea that the lead ions are soluble, and so they may be in solution, or the lead ions may come from old lead pipes which the water goes through. Kritika tests a sample of the polluted river water with a barium chloride solution. Predict what Kritika would observe and explain why. So first thing is it has a white precipitate, and that's because barium sulfate is produced, which is insoluble, or you could just say due to the presence of sulfate ions. So you can see that sulfate ions are in the water, so if you add barium chloride, those sulfate ions are going to produce a white precipitate of barium sulfate. We're on to the physics section now. So it says Nita rubs a rod with a duster. The rod is made from an insulating material. The rod becomes negatively charged. Which of the statements is true? So the true statement is B. The rod has gained electrons from the cloth. Kevin works in the car manufacturing industry. Electrostatics is used in the car manufacturing industry to spray paint cars. The paint travels towards the car body. Kevin connects the car body to the negative terminal of the power supply. He forgets to connect the paint gun to the positive terminal. The paint does not spray evenly over the car. Explain why. So 4 marks here for this question. So first mark saying the droplets have no charge, so they don't repel. Second mark saying that this means the paint does not produce a mist or a fine spray. The third mark saying that the paint is not charged opposite to the car, or the car does not attract the paint. And the fourth mark saying that this means the paint is not attracted into the shadows, or there's not an even coat of paint. So first mark saying they don't repel because there's no charge on the droplets. Second mark saying that means they don't produce a mist or fine spray. Then say that the car doesn't attract the paint because they're not oppositely charged, and then that means the paint does not evenly coat the car. Phil has a desktop computer. It has a 5 amp wire fuse in the plug. What could be the consequence of replacing the 5 amp fuse with a 15 amp fuse? So this is the idea that when the current is too high for the computer, the 13-amp fuse will not melt or blow, and that means that it could result in overheating or damage or a fire in the computer. So those 2 points in either of those 2 marks. Phil also has a kettle and a hairdryer. The kettle has 3 wires connecting it to the main supply. The hairdryer only has 2 wires connected to the main supply. The 2 wires are brown and blue. Appliances with only 2 wires are double insulated. This symbol is shown on the appliance. Explain why a double insulated appliance does not need the 3rd wire. So the first mark saying what the 3rd wire is. So it's the earthing wire. So you just say that it's for the 3rd wire is for earthing, or you can say the earthing wire is not needed. And the second mark is saying because the case is made of an insulator or plastic, so that means it cannot become live. Or you could say that the case does not conduct. Next question, ultrasound is a longitudinal wave. P is a particle in a longitudinal wave. Look at the diagram. How does the particle P move in the longitudinal wave but a ring around the correct answer? So it moves from side to side, so there's your correct answer there. Doctors use ultrasound for some medical scans rather than x-rays. Give 2 reasons why. So these are 2 reasons. So ultrasound can give image of soft tissue, which x-rays can't. So x-rays give you images of bone, which is hard tissue, but not the soft tissue, which ultrasounds can. And ultrasound doesn't damage cells, which x-rays do. Some nuclear power stations use uranium at 235. The graph shows how the activity of uranium-235 decreases with time. Use the graph to work out the half-life of uranium-235. You must draw lines on the graph to show how you calculate your answer. So what you want to do is find a point, so you can use 1,000 if you like. That's 0 years, and then half of 1,000 will be 500. So all you have to do is just read across and find out how long it takes for the activity count to go down to 500. You can see that is 700 million years. So 700 to get you the mark there. But anything in between 700 and 740 would get you the 2 marks there. Uranium is not used as a medical tracer because it has an alpha emitter. Explain one other reason why uranium-235 is unsuitable for use as a tracer. So this is that uranium has too long a half-life, and so it will remain active in the body for too long. The activity of a nuclear material decreases when radioactive particles are emitted. This can be caused by the emission of an alpha particle. Complete the nuclear equation below to represent the alpha decay of uranium-235 into thorium. Put your answers on the dotted lines. So you need 231 there, and 90, and an alpha particle, remember, is 42. It's a helium nucleus. So that's how you know how to put this, and then all you're going to do is take 4 away from that one, and 2 away from that one. Look at the data showing the sources that contribute to the average UK radiation dose. Stephen uses the data to conclude that rocks and cosmic rays are the only significant contributors to his radiation dose. Is an appropriate conclusion. Explain why. So you can say no, because medical and ore from inside the human body are not that much smaller. And you can say no because the data is an average and Stephen could have a particular medical condition or job. So those 2 points are for those 2 marks. The final question is a 6-mark question, so please can you mark this yourself and then ask your teacher if you're unsure and ask them to check your answer. And then once you've marked this, add up your total and add it to your poster and then have a go at the next paper.